welcome to Top of the Hops. I'm Mike Riker, and joining me today, I'm very excited. He is I met him through Ken Reedy, who we all know that was on my show about Hulk Hogan matches. And then we worked with YAI. I had my friend Chris on. We talked about some scary movies. And I met this man through Ken Reedy. He is he works for documentaries. One of a great one I watched called Living the Fantasy about fantasy football. We'll get into that. His name is Josh Adler. Josh, thanks so much for joining me today, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a Saturday morning. I assume my son is still asleep at home. My wife is in bed with our dog watching a Lifetime movie. And I get to be here in my studio and talking to you.
That's amazing. You got this documentary coming out. We talked to Ken about it, how we survive a zombie apocalypse. I was lucky enough to see a raw trailer of it. It looks amazing. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait. I'm really hoping this gets a lot of play because it looks tremendous. Talk a
Thank
little bit about that and how you came about doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You mentioned Living the Fantasy, and you and I talked beforehand. Living the Fantasy is the first documentary I made. I didn't set out to be a documentary filmmaker. I went to graduate school for film at Columbia. But I got a good education there, was, left. I was a college professor for a while, and I did Living the Fantasy because I think, as I told you, I love fantasy sports. It's funny, when I was at Columbia, one of my professors, a very well-known producer, and everybody's always trying to talk to him, hoping they're going to be the next kid that's takes. And I never did, but I used to wear an Atlanta Braves jersey to class all the time because I'm a huge Braves fan. And when you're at film school, you don't find a lot of people who are like big into sports, which is totally makes sense. But I'm somewhat well-rounded. I grew up with a father's an opera singer, and
Wow.
my mother's an Israeli opera and Broadway musical lover. So I could talk to you about Broadway theater just as much as I could talk to you about film or sports. Um, that sounds like a total brag. I'm also, but to let anybody listening know, those are the only three things I could talk about. Anything else is great. So Living the Fantasy came because I love fantasy sports, but it also came out of hunger. Like, I was broke. And I thought, you know what? I bet I could get some people to invest in a movie about fantasy, and I did. And after that, you know, I started a company called LPA Video Productions. We do a lot of commercials, a lot of corporate stuff. Nothing exciting, but it pays the bills. And I wasn't actually planning ever to make a documentary again. Long story short, it was just tough for me because every story I tend to say is way too
Oh,
long.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Ken Reedy met my wife through the internet, which is always good. You either meet good people or serial killers. And
Listen, that's how I met my wife, so that's okay.
is she a serial killer?
No, but I married through the internet.
By the way, if she was a serial killer and you didn't know it, that would be amazing. And if
That
it
would
happens,
be a good documentary.
I'd love to make a fucking documentary. That'd be great. So my wife, where my wife likes to volunteer me for shit all the time. I mean, I've rescued 40, 50 dogs through my life because she's reached out to people, and then I get home and she's like, you need to go to this place and rescue this dog, and we will find a home for it. So in this case, she was donating some of my old film equipment. Ken Reedy said on social media, yes, I'll take it. And she said, my husband used to be a film professor and he owns a production company. If you ever need any help, he's like, well, I have a bunch of a group of disabled men that want to learn how to make a film. So she gives my number, he calls me. Now, this is where I'm kind of stupid, and I mean this very sincerely. When they said adults with disabilities, I was like, okay, whatever, bring them in. I expected, like, oh, they're going to come, these guys are going to have a limp, or maybe walking
Right.
with a cane.
Or in a wheelchair, yeah.
Yeah. And so I even called Ken and said, hey, I'm on the second floor of my studio where I'm at right now. It's on the second floor. He's like, oh no, they could all get up, don't worry. So I look out the window when they come, and I realize that, oh, that's what he means by disabilities. These are intellectually disabled men. And my first thought was, oh shit, what am I going to do? I planned this film class, which it was sort of a version of my college course. How am I going to do this?
Mm.
And then I thought, fuck it, I'll just do it. I just won't curse.
Right.
And they came in and the most amazing time. Just love these guys. Just love them. There's a picture on my website of me with them of that day.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be it. I had this great time. But then at the end, I looked at them in my sarcastic kind of glib way, and I'm like, guys, come on. You want to make a film? They want to make a film about the zombie apocalypse. I'm like, guys, I went to a very good film school, making films. It's very hard to make film. It's like saying, I want to be a violinist, and you're just going to pick up a violin and fucking play a violin. No, it doesn't happen.
Right.
I said, why do you want to do this, guys? Come on. And Chris, who you had on your show, looked at me and not a way that he was like, hey, this is why, could you help me make it happen, but just an innocent way. He said, I never see myself or people like me in movies unless we're playing people who are there to be disabled.
Mm.
I want to see somebody like a movie about people who just are disabled, who do things in movies.
Right.
When he said that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like legit. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. But next day, I'm like, if they do this, I want to make a documentary about it. Called two of my best friends who are both film producers. And I said this not in the like wink, wink, tell me how great this is so I could do it. I said this in a way of like, talk me out of this. You know how busy I am. You know how I make my money. You know, if I do this, I'm going to lose money because I'm going to do it out of my own pocket. But I want to make a film about them making this documentary. I mean, making a documentary about them making a zombie film. I think it's going to be, and like, talk me out of it. I need to hear common sense. And both of them are like, oh yeah, you got to do this film. And then one of them, I'm like, hey, you have zero time. He's not a producer anymore. He works actually for the government. I'm like, you need to help me produce this. And I know you're going to say no, but please. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you produce this. So for the last a little over a year, I've been filming after I got the contracts done with YAI to give me permission to do all this. I've been going there all the time. My wife is like, are you going there again? You need to make money. We are broke.
Yeah.
But my whole thing was I'm going to offend people here. I don't know if you have 4 listeners or 4,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
But any of your listeners, I hope I don't offend you by saying I hate crowdsourcing. I hate going on Kickstarter and saying, I want to make a movie. Can you give me money? Because bullshit. It's just panhandling for art. A lot of my friends will be offended by what I just said. I'll tell you that. So I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to find an investor because I had an investor for my last film. I made no money because of that, because I own nothing. Because by the time he got paid, or any of my investors got paid, nothing for me. So I basically made living the fantasy, and I was easily the least. Me and my producer were easily the least paid people on that film. I mean, I did not make more than enough money just to get by. So for this one, I'm like, I own the studio. I have all the equipment. I'm not a very good shooter, but I could shoot it. And I don't need it to look pretty, actually. I kind of want it just to look raw and just be there. And like, there's going to be times where I'm a little out of focus and the sound's not great. So I just started shooting it, not knowing what I was going to go shoot. Like, and to be honest, Mike, like, I was terrified for this reason. I think most people have this misconception about people with disabilities that it's going to be really sad. I'm going to be really sad all the time. I'm going to be so sad. This will be so sad. And it couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm not saying this like to get you to feel a certain way. I'm just telling you, if I'm having a shit day, if I'm worried about money, I suffer from anxiety. If I'm anxious, and my Klonopin ain't working quite well, or my wife and I are in a fight, or if I'm worried about my son, if I go there, all that shit flies out and everybody's like happy to see me. And so selfishly, I'm like, oh, these are my friends now. And they're just like, oh, at first, and it wasn't like, they're not like, oh, that guy with the camera is here. They're like, Josh is here. How are you? Your son? Like, just the best people I've ever met. the best fucking people I've ever met. And I realized immediately, I knew my film was called How We Survive a Zombie Apocalypse. And it hit me very fast that we, as neuronormative people, again, I also learned a lot of things that we say. I'm like, because I would always ask questions like, what are we called? We're not called normal, because that's that they're not normal. And again, I think it's, by the way, for anybody listening, it's always great if you don't know what to say, ask somebody, and they're like, "Oh, it's neuronormative." Well, when
Okay.
you call them, we had terrible words for it when you and I grew up, right?
Yes, very
All
much
right,
so.
it's like they're intellectually disabled. These are the people we support. That's it.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so the words are, as somebody who my son is adopted, I hate when people say stupid things about that. I don't mind if they ask me, but if they're like, does he know his real mom? I'm like, yes, she lives in my house with us. That is his real mom. You know what I mean? No, I know what you mean, but we're going to learn the right term. If
Right.
it's a birth mother,
Biological mother, is that
biological mother
right?
is great.
Yeah.
But when you say real mom, you're talking about somebody who held my son in her womb for 9 months, and then did an incredibly selfless thing and placed that child up for adoption. And we were there at the birth of my son. Like, so if you say that my wife's not real because because of genetics, or because she didn't carry our child, uh, and and if you say that and it was an accident, great, let's talk, let's now have the real terms. But
Right.
if you keep saying, oh, come on, you know what I mean, stop being so sensitive, then you could go fuck yourself, you know
Yeah. No,
like
I agree.
that's not me being fucking woke. That's not that's just me being like, don't you dare ever say that. So the same thing comes with people with disabilities. Ask questions. Like, I fucked up all the time, but these people aren't just subjects of my film. It's been amazing, and I went into it so scared, and people will often tell me, oh my god, it's so amazing what you're doing, so great, let's great. I'm like, shut up, man. I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for me. It's
Yeah.
totally selfish. And I didn't know a story I'd be telling. Like, there's a guy in my film who follow who you're going to fall in love with, and halfway through the film he gets deported. Not the film, sorry, halfway through my film, but halfway through the life of this documentary, he literally gets deported
Mm.
because of an unfair government act. Like, a guy who's been here since he was 1 year old. There, I learned that 85% of people with intellectual disabilities are sexually abused at some point.
Yeah.
Like, I learned these things, and the film, yes, is about them making this movie. And hopefully, I think you're really going to find it funny and just really enjoyable. And a few people who have seen that rough cut of the trailer, most people have been very, very effusive about it. And I'm very appreciative because I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
A few close friends have been like, Josh, you got to be a little careful because not everyone knows your sense of humor, and people might think you're making fun of them. And I was thrown back, and I went to Ken and John, who are in charge at YAI, and I said, and they loved the trailer. And I'm like, this doesn't look like I'm making fun of them. And they were like, what? And they said, they said, which I was so appreciative. They said, anybody who thinks you're making fun of them has never worked with people with disabilities.
Right.
What I did was I treated them like humans.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say, Josh, is when I saw that, yes, in the beginning of it, you knew that they were mentally, intellectually disabled. By the end of it, I wasn't even thinking that. I wasn't even thinking that they were. It was just a movie about this group.
Yeah.
It wasn't even about, oh my, I feel so bad. No, it wasn't even like that at all. I was laughing. I was like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. So I
Yeah.
didn't even think about their disability at all towards the end of the trailer.
I'm glad. Like, again, I think that it's okay even if you did. If you're like, yeah, they're
Right.
disabled. Of course they're disabled. But one thing, yesterday I was shooting with so hard for me as a filmmaker to say people, like, because I was going to say a character named. I'm like, wait, she's not a character. One of my subjects, Luce, who's one of my
Lovely.
favorite people in the world. She's
Yeah.
amazing. And I went with them to film. She was like, to do this last scene for their film out in the woods in this trail. Like, I had to hike, I had to get my fat ass with my camera and just like do this. And I was wearing like a nice like sweater and button down shirt, and I didn't realize. So we're out there, and like all I ever do is fuck with Luce. Like I joke with her all the time, and from what I'm told, she loves me, and she like constantly talks about how she loves me because I'm not like Luce. Luce, God bless you, darling. I'm just like Luce, and I break her balls, and I break, and we do that. And there's some people that I'm following who I can't do that with,
Yeah.
and I know that. Like, there's a lovely guy named Derek who has Down syndrome, who I'm not going to like break his balls in the same way because he will not interpret it in the same way. But then there's a guy, Dave, that every time he sees me, he's like, Josh, I'm going to get you, Josh. I'm going to get you. And I'm like, Dave, I'm going to fuck you up, man. And like fun, because people are just so sensitive. And I was one of them, man.
Yeah.
I was a person that if I saw people with intellectual disabilities at the mall, I'm like, oh God, poor people. Oh, bless them, bless their hearts. But stay away from me because I don't want to have to think about it.
Yeah, it's funny because I went there in September to do a class with them
Mm-hmm.
on, radio and YouTube and stuff like that. And I was kind of like that too. I was like, oh, how am I gonna talk to them? I'm gonna talk to them like little children. Should I? And I just said to myself, you know what? Just talk to them like real people.
Yeah.
And that's why I did. And it
Oh,
was yeah, exactly, because they're people.
yeah.
So, and I got such a great gratification out of doing that, and met so many great people like Luce, like Chris, and some of the workers over there too. And it was just such a rewarding experience that I want to do more with them.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was such a great time, and my wife came with me too, and she even said the same thing. She's like, "We have to go back.
Yeah.
Let's do more." So it was just a tremendous experience.
Yeah, I've already told them I'm like my biggest like I'm in a way like taking my time to finish this film. Like we're already editing it now and looking where we edited the trailer and my editor taking the second cut. At that point, he's got to stop editing it because I then need to raise enough money to pay him to edit the whole thing because
Right.
I did this all out of pocket and I cannot afford to keep going. So I'm going to need to find the money somehow. But yeah, I'm like, I just want to keep going back there
Yeah.
all the time. And like, like about them being people, yeah, it's just a constant thing. Like I love being a documentary filmmaker and not living the fantasy you mentioned, and I'm so appreciative that you liked it. I don't like it. like,
Why?
and
Why is that, Josh?
I'll explain why. What I don't love about living the fantasy is that I went into it with this is what the story's going to be, and then it happened. Like a guy named Corey won $1 million. There was another guy that I can't stand in the film personally, but he was a fantastic character. I really enjoyed hanging out with him. I really did. I thought he was a fun hang, but I'm an adult now, and I also think he's a misogynist dick who treats women disgustingly
Mm.
and is look, is would say just horrible things about immigrants and this and that off camera. And, but I was making a documentary. It wasn't about that. And also being sponsored by DraftKings, I had a responsibility. And if I find something out, I couldn't do that where I'm really going to show people they are. So I watch it. I'm like, oh, to me, it just feels very manipulated,
Gotcha. Yeah.
and I don't love it. Opposed to what I'm doing now, which is just like I went into it not knowing what I was going to do, knowing they're gonna make a film about the zombie apocalypse, and that's gonna be so much fun. But I had no idea what else I was planning on doing. I just let the documentary happen, and those stories just were so easy to find because they just appeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love living in fantasy only because, you know, being in this world of fantasy football for so many years and not knowing all this stuff that happens in Vegas and then did you film stuff at Sirius XM? Did you
yeah,
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 because I was there at the time. So I
yeah,
know you I've worked with Pilar, I've worked with Scott Engel, I've had Nick Bakay on I used to do a fantasy football show. I
uh,
produced a show for 2 years with Adam Kaplan and John Hansen, and we had Nick Bakay on all the time. So it
yeah.
was like
Well,
so
Nick wasn't supposed to be in my film. So I've actually reached out to him multiple times before when I was like just graduated Kenyon. He went to my undergrad Kenyon College, and so he's like, "Oh, a famous guy went there." And not famous like Tom Cruise famous for anybody listening, but Nick Bakay is a very well known writer and
mhm.
the voice of some cat in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, like really funny guy. And he happened to be at this event. And I'm like, I went to Kenya and I'm doing a documentary. Can I interview? He's like, yeah, I'll interview. So I had a great interview with him. But honestly, like I probably spent half that interview just trying to impress him. Like,
Right.
like I wanted to be funny. So he'd be like, that guy's funny. So, not proud of that, but I was a lot younger. But yeah, so like the documentary I'm doing now is just like, it's just, I'm going to film them and I'm doing my own equipment and I'm going and I'm not going to manipulate a story. I'm just going to find the story. And I love it. I'm so proud of it. I'm so hopeful that it'll be seen by people. Like people watch and be like, that was fun. That was funny. And I learned a shitload.
So it's funny I was surprised that you actually wanted to come on my show. So because one of the things that we do talk about is you see behind me, I do have beer, and I know you don't like beer. So you said you hate the taste of beer, so
So,
which is cool.
Can I just explain myself too?
Sure, absolutely.
Like totally self-deprecating way. I don't get why people like beer. I understand that I am the anomaly here. I am the one that's off. But God's honest truth, I grew up in a town called Macon, Georgia. You could tell by my deep Southern accent. My father's from the Bronx. My mother's Israeli. We wound up there when I was 4. I love Macon for many reasons, but I doubt it's different in high school up here than it is there. When you're in high school, you go to a party and you get a red cup and you're drinking beer, you're the Miller Lite. I would take it, and I swear to God, I would go to the bathroom, pour it down the drain, walk out, and I would pretend to be tipsy because I hated the taste so much. Like it was just so gross to me. And it's still, and as an adult, I'm like, oh, I'm an adult. Maybe I'll like it now. And I'll try it. I'm like, it tastes like piss to me. I don't know. I don't get what's happening in my mouth.
And that's it's funny you say that. And we have kind of like similar at the age of 4, my family moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I lived in the South for 20 years, and much like you at parties, they would give me beer, and I was the same way, Josh. I hated it. I hated Bud. I hated Miller Lite. I didn't get into beer until I was in my 40s.
Okay.
So when someone introduced me to a different type of beer, I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then it kind of started from there. You still give me now a Bud or a Miller or an Old Milwaukee. I'm like, this sucks. Like, get this away from me. So I'm like a beer snob. I go more
Yeah.
for more expensive beers and more craft beers. So, but I listen. I totally get it. I was like that for a very long time, and just up until recently. So I get it. So
In
it's
your
not for everybody.
defense, in your defense, you're right. Like I've had friends be like, this is an amazing, beer, try this. And I'll try it and I don't like it, but I'm like, oh, it doesn't taste like piss to me.
Right? Yeah,
It's like,
right.
this is like, I'm not going to order it. I'm not going to drink more of it, but like, I could stomach that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
yeah.
listen, it's not for everybody. It's just something that I've gotten to and I've gotten a passion for, which I've been learning how they make it, and it's like someone said on my earlier episode, it actually isn't kind of an art, on the making and the
Totally.
process of beer. So I've just been totally into it. So,
Isn't
but
anything great an art? Like, look at a Maserati opposed to a Honda. Now, certain Hondas, they might almost look somewhat the same. And my son and I were talking about that as he's 12 and him and his friends are really into like fancy cars and this. And I'm like the Maserati, that's an art. I'm assuming I've never been in one. I'm poor, but
me too.
but
So
but yeah, like if you look at it, to me, it looks like a nice car. But what makes it a Maserati, I'm guessing, is what's inside of it, and there's an art to that.
yes, there is
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So what are you drinking today? What are we doing?
So I again, just because I'm a long-winded, loquacious fart, I'm gonna tell you this. I was gonna come. I don't drink
Okay.
really. Like I go to Vegas with my best friends once a year. We've been doing it since we were 23. When we were 23, we were all piling into the cheapest hotel room that we could. Now that we're in our 40s, I'll say, but late 40s. We each get our own suite and we spend way too much. But I drink then, but now I actually just get a bunch of gummies and stay high all. But so my friends make fun of me and they love ordering for me because they're like, the waitress will come up, say, what do you like? And they'll be like, get him the fruitiest cocktail, make it really pink and like just delicious with rum and juices. And
Put an umbrella in it.
I'll
Yeah.
like fucking put that umbrella in and walk around with it. Like, make fun of me, man. I'm at the craps table just drinking these things. I'm like, just whatever. They're like, I got you. I got you. So this morning I left the house. I back in the day when I used to try to be mature, I would drink Maker's Mark on the rocks.
Okay.
I'm not going to say I liked it. I'm not going to say I disliked it. I'd say I could drink a few Maker's Marks, stomach well, it would give me a nice buzz. That's the other thing. If I have a drink, even though I weigh 220 pounds, and I'm probably lying, I haven't checked the scale. I could be up to 225 for all I know. I could get drunk off of like one, finger of Maker's Mark. Like, I am a lightweight because I drink so little. So I was going to do that. And I'm like, oh, fuck it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to 7-Eleven. Remember when we were kids? I think I'm probably a few years older than you. We were kids, like 16. You'd go to the gas station and get Boone's. And Boone's was like 99 cents. It was like strawberry wine, something. Right. And you do that. So I'm like, oh, I wonder if they have Boone's. They didn't. So I went to 7-Eleven and I got I could only get it a 6-pack. I got a 6-pack of Smirnoff Ice, raspberry.
I love it.
And the end to that story, by the way, is as I'm leaving, I went to the 7-Eleven guy. I'm like, I just want you to know, I know it's 8 a.m. I'm not, this is for a special reason. I'm not just drinking. He's like, I don't give a
whatever.
Shit. I'm driving home and I get this text from a woman I know that I'm friendly with. It's like, did I just see you in the parking lot? Blah blah. I say, yeah. She's like, did I just see you there? I'm like, yeah. I said, okay, if you saw me with a 6-pack of Smirnoff Ice, I'm going on this guy's YouTube show, podcast, and the whole thing's about beer. I don't drink beer. She's like, all right, no judgment. I'm like, no, I'm serious, man. I'm not getting Smirnoff Ice. She's like 8 a.m. on a Saturday, dropping her kid off at music class. And I'm like, hey, who's that guy? I know he's a filmmaker. Oh.
You must be having a rough day today.
Having a blueberry muffin, a Diet Coke, and a 6-pack of Smirnoff Ice.
Listen, I don't hate it. I've had Smirnoff Ices. Not, I can dive into one if it's in the cooler.
This is bearable to me. I told you, I'm like, I never smoked pot. I wasn't that kind of kid, but in my later adulthood, I kind of got into like edibles here and there, and then vape pen occasionally. Like, I got nicely high last night, but Mom, if you're listening to this, grow up. But pot is so much better for you than alcohol. And remember that my dad was an alcoholic, a functional one and a lovely man, God rest his soul. But like, I love pot, but I have severe anxiety. So it actually gives me, some people say pot is great for anxiety. For me, it actually causes panic attacks. Funny panic attacks. I can't physically breathe, but I'm laughing through it because I'm like, then like I have to do pot with a Klonopin to like settle it down. Oh, fucking mess.
Oh my God, it's hilarious. So I mean, Smirnoff Ice. Listen, Ken didn't even have beer on my show either. He had I think he had like scotch or something. So no judgment. So today,
by the way, judge me. I'm 48 years old and drinking a Smirnoff Ice.
And by the way, you're not older than me. I'm older than you. So Smirnoff Ice is not bad. I don't give a shit what anybody says. If it's there on a summer day in a cooler, I'm gonna pick it up. I'm gonna drink it.
Tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes good.
Again, I'm probably not going to be able to drive home for like 3 hours because once Smirnoff Ice, again, because I'm such a lightweight when it comes to alcohol, will be like, oh, I'm a little buzzed, and I will never drive, even if I'm like 1%.
Yeah, I'm the same way, especially with kids. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So with my kids, I drive drunk all the time because then it's funny.
That's okay then. Right.
I pray that anyone listening to that got that. I'm kidding.
So since it's October, I decided to do a pumpkin ale. So it's kind of cool little art there. It's from Bronx Brewery. It's called Tattooed Pumpkin. So I love these beer cans because they made these. It's a local artist that does it in the Bronx, and they do graffiti outside the brewery,
Yeah.
and he does the beer cans as well. So
I
it's a
gotta
pumpkin.
say though, it does look like it's like, hey kids,
Yeah,
drink beer, but if you do, this one's fun.
and my little glass here. See if you're killing me, Smalls. I don't know if you
Go
can
a
see it.
little closer because
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
all right. A little for the movies. You got
yeah. Little you killing me,
here's my
Smalls.
confession. Here's my
Oh,
confession in life. I've never seen that movie all the way through. And I love sports movies. I love movie. Like all I do is watch fucking movies.
right. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would definitely recommend it. But here's to you, Josh.
L'chaim.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. So
Wow, thank you for having me. I'm a media whore. I'll go on it. If someone is like, I got one subscriber and it's my cat, I'll be like, yeah, I'll come on. That's almost offensive to you. It's like, all right,
No,
thanks.
it's okay. Listen, it's okay. So yeah, this is good. It tastes like, not for you, but it tastes like a pumpkin ale.
Mike, if
So
I
it's
was with you, I would take a sip
yeah, it's
out
good.
of
Like I
the
said,
straw because I definitely have a lot of diseases.
so it's got a little bit of cinnamon, it's got a little bit of nutmeg, it's got that pumpkin flavor. It's got that beer taste though too. So it's like almost like a pumpkin ale, but it's very good. So
Good for the fall,
so
buddy.
I'll be drinking that towards our show. So today we're doing our top 5 documentaries.
Yeah.
Josh, it was funny. Josh sent me an email, give me a couple of things to do top fives on. So hopefully we could do more of them.
I
We
love
talked
that.
about the year 1999, so about Scorsese movies. So I can't wait to dive into those in the near future. But today is our top 5 documentaries. So before we get to our top 5, Josh, what to you makes a good documentary?
I'll tell you, it's changed through the years.
Okay.
And you'll find it's funny. I did a lot of just like when somebody's like, do your top five, I'm like, oh, I got to take this seriously. And I did a lot of all right, here's my initial top five that comes off my head. And then I like wrote down a list of, honorable mentions. Then I wrote a list of like, I've never seen this, but I really need to see this. And I spent like, my son kept like, why do you keep watching documentaries this week? I'm like, number one, I'm making a documentary. Number two, I'm going on the podcast and I want to make sure I'm prepared. But to me, I think the most important thing about watching anything, and people will disagree with me, is to be entertained. Aristotle has 6 rules to drama. It's called the Poetics. I don't know if you've ever read, but anybody with a background in writing knows Aristotle's Poetics, and there's 6 basic elements that you need. And though it doesn't say to be entertained as one of them, it does in a roundabout way. To be entertained, are you entertained? I watched a documentary last night called the Mission, and I'm like, oh, this looks amazing. It's about Mormons who go on a mission in Finland to convert people, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be great. But like probably about 30 minutes into it, and I apologize on the very off chance that somebody involved in that film might listen to this. Like, I was just like, I'm kind of bored. I don't care. I don't care. Like, I don't
Right.
care what happened. So, am I entertained? Are you entertained? And to me, the documentary I've said for the past 15 years, that's my favorite documentary. And we're going to talk about because I can't take it off my list, but it went down from number 1 to number 5 on this list.
Oh wow.
It's a
Okay.
movie that is not a documentary in the pure sense. It feels like a documentary. It looks like a documentary. It's sold as a documentary. But the more research you do on it, it was very much manipulated. Like the 2 guys that were in the film were actually friends. Like things. To me, there is. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I feel like it needs to be real. I want to look into the world of either this famous actor or people with disabilities or fantasy sports, whatever, and know that like I'm seeing the world. Now, is it possible? Like, let's talk about bias. A documentary, I think, should be unbiased. That's almost impossible because at the very least, the filmmaker has a bias. So the documentary I'm about to start about Israel, that I'm literally I'm hoping it'll be a documentary as much about bias as it is about Israel and Palestine and Hamas.
Mm,
Um, when I made Living the Fantasy, I had a bias. I did. Number one, I love fantasy football.
right.
Number two, I got money from DraftKings, and I had rules. I wasn't allowed to say certain things.
Mm,
Um, I felt fine about that, but I don't totally get it. I love Michael Moore. I love him. Great. He's not going to end up on my list of top 5 favorite documentaries because I also am very aware that it's a filmmaker who says, this is what I think. I'm now going to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours proving to you in a very entertaining way why what I think is right.
mm,
It's completely biased. Of course it's biased.
right.
But yeah, so in the long run, look, we're looking to be entertained. If you're gonna tell me I have a documentary about nuclear physicists during the 1940s and how they nuclear physicized stuff, I'm like, I'm done. But if you're like, dude, no, that's so entertaining, like you're gonna love it, I'll be like, all right, I'm in. I'm in.
Yeah.
But if you tell me I have a documentary about the Atlanta Braves and their history and this, I'm like, I'm in. And chances are it's going to be shit. you
Right.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's whatever. So what do you look for?
I'm the same way. It's funny because my top five is subjects I'm into, sports, music, stuff like that. There's a couple that's off a little bit off base, but it's stuff that I'm interested in, and that's why when you started asking me about documentaries, I actually started going out of my realm and starting watching documentaries that I was not into, or stories I didn't know much about.
Right.
And they're not on my list, but a couple examples are Man on Wire,
Yeah.
which I didn't even know about
Yeah.
the French guy who walked across World Trade Center. Uh,
Fantastic.
yeah, fantastic film. Not my top five, but I thought it was fantastic.
Not in my top 5 either, but totally entertained. That being said, do you ever? I also think I'm not saying this is what I look for in a documentary, but I would say all 5 of the ones that are on my list have this in common. I couldn't stop thinking about them.
Interesting.
They stuck
Okay.
with me, and I had to watch them again. And I
Wow.
think there's a lot of not I'm not saying I watch them the next day by any means, but
Right.
I'm saying they're ones that sometimes I put on. Like, oh, I want to rewatch this.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of documentaries that you see once, you're like, yeah, I'm good. Like that was great. I'm good.
Right. Yeah.
That's how it was.
All five of these documentaries I've seen more than twice. So,
Yeah.
and I watched them recently just to make sure that they were the highly recommended back then when I watched them, and they were. But another one I was watched literally a couple of days ago, and I loved it. Again, not my top five, but I thought it was great. Is the 7-5. It's a documentary about the 75th precinct here in New York during the 80s when the cops started becoming crooked. So it's about corrupt cops in East Brook in East New York during the 80s, and it's a fantastic documentary and so out there. Um,
I just
and
wrote it down.
yeah, the seven
That's
five, yes,
your description.
yeah, the 7-5. It's on Tubi. If you have Tubi,
Yeah, I
Tubi's
did.
free. And Tubi's free. So
Tubi's great, man.
yeah, yeah. So if you ever have a chance, I think it came out in 2015.
I'm
Uh,
watching it today.
yeah, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed that one. But I will say though, my top five again is subjects that I'm interested in, and but it also enlightened me and showed me more than I thought I knew. So
Let's both, I think, agree legally right now to say these words. Neither of us, I think, and again, I apologize if I'm wrong, I think are pretending to be some kind of expert and are giving a top 5 list of the best
right,
5 documentaries. And that's why, like, people always say, like, what's your favorite movie? And I'm like mine's pretty easy, but in no way, but very few people will say that's their favorite movie. No, it's
mm,
my favorite movie. And by the way, I also think it's probably one of the best movies ever made. That being said, I doubt I've seen 99% of movies that are out there. That being said, I've most definitely seen 99% more movies than most people.
yes, right,
There's so
right,
many movies.
yeah, and that's why I'm so interested in your top five because I'll be honest with you, if any all the top five that you have, I'm going to go out and look at because I'm so interested in your top five.
Here's my guess. we have one. My guess is we'll have one in common,
Okay,
and
interesting.
my guess is you will probably have heard of the other four, but you may
Okay,
not, but you actually may not have.
okay. So let's start, man. Let's start number five, and we'll come to me after that. What's number five there, Josh?
Number five, I've always said is number one.
Okay.
And after, and I've always known that there's a lot of rumors about it being faked and whatever, but I'm like, I don't care. But now that I'm about to make my third documentary, I'm like, I think I do care. God damn it.
Hmm.
And by the way, funny thing is again, and this shows you, I want to make sure clear, I'm not an expert. Documentary is something I'm into. I am much better talking about different genres of film, but it's funny that four of my films came out between 2003 and 2008, which is from 2002 to 2006, I was at film school. And then
Right.
2008 was right after I was married, and I was still like heavily in the industry, being a writer and stuff. And the other film came out in 1994. But number five is a movie that, again, used to be my favorite. It's called King of Kong.
Numerous classic games that all have something in common. They have an end to the gameplay
There's not quite enough memory for the final board.
because they thought no one would ever get that far, so the game actually just ends. Donkey Kong ends, Pac-Man ends, Miss Pac-Man ends.
In the case of Pac-Man, what happens is that the whole right half of the screen is just completely jumbled garbage. And it's called a kill screen because basically there's no way to finish the level.
A kill screen on Donkey Kong, a kill screen on Pac-Man, a kill screen on Donkey Kong is far more difficult.
And it's called a kill screen because basically there's no way to finish the level. That some sort of random data or code inside the program ends up getting used for what you see on the screen. Donkey Kong is really strange in that it actually lets you play the kill screen level for maybe 5 seconds or so. Everything looks normal, and then suddenly Mario just up and dies on you.
The people who could get, besides myself, that have been seen getting to the end of Donkey Kong. Gee, now that I think about it, I don't think anybody has.
King
Okay.
of Kong. And
King
by
of-
your look, you do not know this movie, which
I do not know this one. Okay, King of
King of
Kong.
Kong is directed by Seth Gordon. It's about a middle school teacher and this like hot sauce mogul who are competing for the Guinness Book of World Records for Donkey Kong.
Oh God, I'm so into this now.
And it's fucking
I
great.
just looked it up, and I'm into it.
Yeah, watch it. Seth Gordon, like if you know anything about him, is a great comedy director. Does a lot of like, I think he does better TV comedy. I think some of his movies haven't been as good as thought so, but I think he's a wonderful director. And you know what I love about, I always use this example, is King of Kong does not look good. Like this is what I want to say. A lot of documentaries you see now, especially on Netflix, Apple, all the things, they look so beautiful. They spend so much money on
Yeah.
budget, so much of their budget on production and just beautiful camera work. Whatever. It's like King of Kong looks like shit, sounds like shit, and it's just so funny. There's a scene where you got this middle school teacher who's clearly on the spectrum, but he's married with kids, and he's like playing Donkey Kong in his garage, and he's like playing, and you hear a kid screaming in the background, and his wife is like, "You have to change his diaper." He's like, I will. Like, and you're like, I watched it before I became a parent, and it was funny as shit. I watched it, I watched it after being a parent. I'm like, motherfucker, change that
you
kid's
get pissed
diaper.
off. Yeah.
Like, I'm pissed off, but it's such a funny, such a charming documentary. My problem with it, the only reason it's not number one on my list is, all right, it's bullshit. Like, it's a bullshit. Like, it's a lot of it's fake, but it's still about two people who are obsessed with Donkey Kong, and I give it a pass.
Is it more of them trying to get the high score? Is that kind of what they're going after?
Yeah, and there's
Okay.
competitions, and it's the world of like geeks in the 1980s, maybe 90s, but I think like I forgot off the top of my head. It's really about them, the world of high stakes, not about being the best at video games, but like those old school video games.
Right. Yeah, I used to love Donkey Kong when I was a kid, so I'm definitely going to be into this.
Yeah,
I'm
you'll love it.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to look at it. It looks really
So,
that's great. I can't wait to. I can't wait to watch it because, like I said, I'm a big Donkey Kong guy, so that's interesting. You mentioned about documentaries, and sometimes they're biased, and this one's definitely like that. But I love it, and I don't necessarily agree with them to an extent. I do, but some I don't. And that's my number five is 2004 Super Size Me.
The double quarter pounder with cheese meal.
Macro supersize.
I think I'm gonna have to go supersize.
It's hard for me to watch him go through this.
So it seems like you're starting to get addicted to it now.
You saw these numbers, right? These numbers are outrageous.
Unfortunately, you cause some major harm to your heart, your liver, your blood.
You're gonna die. You'll die.
I want more.
You gotta stop it.
Supersize the American way. Getting fat, getting broke, either way you're gonna pay. Supersize me.
Supersize it up.
Supersize me.
Make it bacon.
Supersize me. Supersize me. Supersize me.
With Morgan Spurlock. He goes out and for 30 days he's eating McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They have to ask, if they ask him, do you want to supersize it? He's got to say yes. He's going through the doctors and stuff, but it's much more than that. It's about obesity in the United States. It's about what was more shocking to me was some of the lunches and some of the schools that they're providing. They did a study where there was this place that I think somewhere in the Midwest where they were serving healthy lunches, and all their grades were much better than the ones that were getting the shitty lunches. So it's a controversial film as far as, listen, we all know McDonald's is bad for you. Obviously, we're not going to eat it every day like Morgan did. But I thought it was an interesting case study. I thought he did a good job with it. You see some of the pains he goes through, like how much his blood pressure goes up, how much weight he gains. This is a guy who likes meat, but my God, he's eating it 3 times a day, every day for 30 days. And I remember a doctor telling him, you got to stop this. And this is like day 15,
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting. It's like I said, he tends to give the fast food business kind of a black eye. But listen, we all know we all know nobody's gonna eat fast food for that amount of time. It's okay to have it once in a while. But I thought it was an interesting case study. I thought it was fun.
I think the one thing he doesn't talk about enough, I think, in that documentary, and I like it. I like it tremendously. Of course, it's fun, and it's one of the few times that a documentary became so big that it was a thing that people went to see in theaters.
Right.
Even at times when people went to the theaters, people didn't really go to see documentaries, but that was you got to see it. I don't think he talked about maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly. I learned this lesson years ago in a really interesting way, that what's interesting about it is McDonald's is a place that people who are economically that's what I'm looking for. Who are economically challenged.
Yeah.
There's a force. What are we going to do? We have this. And I remember when we were adopting our son, we met with another birth mother, and I remember we went to visit her, this place, and we took her shopping to get food and stuff. And it's they had no money. And the stuff, her mother, I remember, was morbidly obese. And the stuff they ate was we were trying to get them healthier stuff because of the possibility we might adopt the little girl that was in her belly at the time. And it's they just are used to eating really bad stuff, and I get it, it's a financial thing. But yeah, I think look, Morgan Spurlock, he's a phenomenal entertainer. He's I want to do a film about these problems we have in America, and I'm going to do it in this really interesting way, and I love that. Of course, the bias and the manipulation, I think, comes more from, those scenes with this doctor that are very you got to stop this, or all right, what you're doing is unhealthy, but let's not pretend you're about to fucking die. You're doing 30
Agreed.
days.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, And you're right. He does touch on the economic point of view a little bit. But you're right. Probably not enough.
Yeah.
He goes to these McDonald's, like, it's funny. He goes to these McDonald's in Texas, and they offer him like the barbecue burger. It's
Yeah.
like, and it's this huge big burger like
Yeah.
this. And then, but if you go to McDonald's, say in Germany or in Russia, it's a totally different experience.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, in America, we look,
yeah,
we try to eat healthy in our house. Like I'm overweight. I gained a lot of weight over COVID out of just boredom, depression, this and that. And I'm not overweight because I can't afford to eat better. I'm overweight because I have an addiction to food, and I use it as I use it the same way people use alcohol and drugs. And I'm not proud of that, but it's obvious. I when things are bad in my life, I look to food for comfort. I learned that through therapy. I get that. The people that I think often have the biggest problem with weight in our country are the people in a lower class, because it is expensive to eat well.
It is. I mean, look. You go to Whole Foods. You go to any of these. I mean, I went one time. I was like, oh my god, I'm spending so much money here just to eat healthy. And it's like, how can I keep doing this every month? I can't. It's hard.
Yeah. So anyway, supersize me. Great.
Yeah. All right. Number 4. What we got, Josh?
Number 4 should be number 1 on any list, because out of the list I'm giving you, this is obviously the best documentary. But there's movies on here like the 7 Up series that isn't on my list that should be. It's the greatest documentary of all time. There's The Last Waltz, which isn't on my list because, as brilliant as it is, it's just like, it's not my top 5. This is my top 5. It should be 1, but I'm going to put it at 4 because it's not my like, oh, I got to watch this all the time. Like, it really sticks with me. And I'm guessing it's the one documentary that might be on both our lists. It is Hoop Dreams.
With a game, with a basket and a ball. It becomes a journey of heartbreak and hope, from city streets to the brink of fame. Isaiah Thomas! The amazing story of 2 boys and 2 families struggling against the odds.
My mother, God bless her, she's always said to me, this America, you can make something of your life.
Against the system.
You have to realize you can make their team win.
To make a dream come true.
All I ever dreamed about was playing in the NBA.
People ask me, will I remember them if I make it? I tell them, will you remember me if I don't?
Hoop Dreams, an extraordinary true story, a unique motion picture experience.
Am I right?
It'll be coming up soon. Yes.
Yeah. So why don't we wait till it comes up with you?
Okay. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about it. Yeah. Let's let me hear why it's number 4 for you.
It's just it's a pure documentary, and it's one that, again, when we talk about bias, maybe there's bias in it, but it's one that you just watch. You're just watching a story about these 2 young men that you'll never hear of again because neither of them made it professionally. Basketball players, but it's about 2 young men, Arthur G and William Gates, I believe, who are in high school, and these documentarians for many years followed them as they were being recruited and were going to be professional NBA basketball players. And it's heartbreaking. It's not beautiful by any means.
That's what I love about the movie. Josh.
It's it's just a beautiful feeling. It's Hoop Dreams. And like, this isn't a story about LeBron James. This is a story about the guys who wanted to be LeBron James and maybe could have if it wasn't for horrible economic. But there's a reason that African Americans in inner cities play basketball, and it's not just because, oh yeah, they're natural. The racist is going to say like, oh, those people, they could just play basketball. No, it's basketball is the one sport that all you need is a ball and shoes that could get you. Like, you don't need to buy thousands of dollars of hockey gear, or like, my son playing little league. My son's not going to be a professional baseball player. He spent $300 on a fucking bat.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even a lot, but it really is, like, as much as it's about these two boys turning into men and their hopes of being NBA stars, it's about economic disparity in our country. And it's heartbreaking, and it's brilliant, and it's super long. And it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, for Best Documentary.
That's crazy. I mean, yeah.
It also shows you the racism of and Siskel and Ebert famously, like, I don't know if you know this, but Siskel and Ebert were obsessed with this movie. And this is an interesting fact. After the film failed, I'm reading off, obviously, stuff I found from the internet. After the film failed to receive an Oscar nomination for Best Documentary, Siskel and Ebert learned about the nominating process, which has changed since. Said that members of the Academy's documentary committee, who weren't documentary filmmakers or just the committee, they held flashlights when they watched documentaries, and anyone who had given up could just wave the flashlight against the screen. And this movie was turned off, and the movie would be turned off if the majority were waving flashlights. Hoop Dreams was turned off after 15 minutes.
Really?
Come on, man.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I watched this when it first came out, and then I hadn't seen it in years. I went back and watched it a couple years ago. And I'll talk more about it because it's in my top 5. The one scene that got to me early on, watching it the second time, was when one of the boys was as an 8th grader watching Isaiah Thomas on the screen.
Yeah.
And like, I want to be him. And just like the wide eye, hoping that he becomes him. Just like you said, it's heartbreaking, some of the struggles he went through. It's a fantastic documentary. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. And even if you're not a basketball fan, you don't have to be to watch this movie.
And that's great. And and again, I'm going to say this quickly because we talked too much about it, but Living the Fantasy for me was always like, I want anyone who doesn't care about fantasy football to enjoy my movie.
Yes.
I failed. I don't think that is possible. I think, like, my mom watched it. It was like, oh, that's fascinating. But like, she wasn't going to watch this. Like, my problem with it, and I think the reason Living Fantasy didn't do great was, number one, it's not a great documentary. Number two, it's people think they're going to watch it if they love fantasy sports. People who love fantasy sports don't necessarily meld with people who love documentaries. So people who love documentaries are like, I don't want to watch one about fantasy sports. People who love fantasy sports are like, I don't want to watch a documentary. That's a tough thing.
I watched it and I loved it. So
well, I appreciate it. And I don't mean to make my own film, but I'm saying Hoop Dreams is one, like,
yeah.
My wife's never seen it, but that's because my wife, I can't imagine sitting anywhere for 3 hours or more.
Yeah, it's long, but it had to be long because, and I think I read somewhere where originally it was supposed to be only 1 year and it just turned into 4.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it only 4? I thought it was way more than that. But
it was 4. And I read somewhere else where I think these two have a podcast together.
Oh,
the two boys are reliving some of their younger days. So I think they have a podcast. I'd love to check it out. But
I gotta look that up.
Yeah, it's a great number 4.
What's your number 4?
Yeah, my number 4 is I lived it, kind of. It's an outrageous documentary, but it's true. And that is, I'm trying to think of the year. I think it's 2000. I think it came out during 2020, and it's Class Action Park.
Baby, let me take you where the action's hot. Action park. We can ride the excitement and feel the park rock. Action park. The action never stops at Action Park.
Looking
for a great place for the family this summer? Well, Action Park has 75 of the wildest, wettest family rides in the world just minutes away.
The action never stops at Action Park.
Just watched that like a month ago randomly.
It is outrageous, but it's true. I was there. I went to Action Park probably a little bit after its glory days in the 80s. I went in like the early 90s, but still it was run by kids and not adults. I love the fact that some of listen, it sounds horrible, but some of the injuries they had at that park, with the tooth lodged in during one of the slides, and the way they show it too with the cartoon characters, and they're showing that like almost like a skeleton going up the up the slide, and the tooth lodging there, and the guy doing the Tarzan swing, and pulling down his pants, and that's all true. It was a crazy place. It gets a little heartbreaking at the end. Obviously, there was a couple of deaths there. And
I think my problem is it wasn't heartbreaking enough. Like, I think they had so much talking about how fucked up this was that it's like, it was like, oh yeah, and some people died. And you're like, and I get it. It's a fun documentary about really stupid.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but they did talk to that one family, which is like, oh shit, this is real. Like, like people who haven't been to Action Park, they watch that and it's like, ha ha ha, and I was like, what? Oh, that really happened?
Yeah, my wife went.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. The part where Donald Trump was looking at to buy it, and he's saying, no, this is too crazy even for me. So it's like, if Donald Trump's not buying it, there's something wrong with this damn park. But listen, I survived it. I enjoyed myself there. I'll be honest with you, but it's a crazy documentary.
But as a father now, you're probably thinking,
holy shit. I would never let my son go there. No, never. Exactly. Yeah. And I think the star of the movie is it Chris Gethard? That's the comedian. Yeah, he's a New Jersey guy. He's very funny. Like, he talks about, and it's not funny, but he talks about, the wave pool and how someone passed away in that. And then all of a sudden a second person dies. It's like, what the fuck? Why would they just close the goddamn wave pool after a first person died? So it's like I said, it's outrageous, it's crazy, but I love it, and probably because I've been there a few times, so that kind of holds a special place in my heart. I love Class Action Park.
It's amazing. Look, the reason we love roller coasters is because we get the adrenaline without the actual chance of death. The horrible thing about Class Action Park, it seems, that you get the adrenaline. You could die.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when this was after its heyday. I went in the 90s. Listen, you had to be careful. You can't be stupid while you're there. You know what I'm saying? So people, but there was a lot of drunk people online. There was a lot of drunk people working the rides. Let's be honest. I mean, these kids were not. They were running the park. There was no adults running that park.
Are you ever at like a regular carnival? Like the carnival comes into town, and you're about to let your child go on a ride, and you look at the guy running it, and you're like, how did that guy do in algebra? Like, and not saying that algebra has anything to do with it, but you're like, wow, like the guy in charge of safety and whatever doesn't look like he had a lot of academic achievement when he was in. Well, that was offensive. I'm going to stop talking now.
But like I said, that's my number 4. All right, number 3, what do we have?
Every Little Step, 2008.
Every Little Step.
You've never heard of that? That's okay.
I have not.
We're going to go in groups of 10. All we're looking at right now is technique and time.
I remember always rehearsing, always practicing, because I knew this is what I wanted to do since I was little.
You've been cut. Can you please get out?
It's not for the weak of heart, I'll tell you that.
The chorus line, I think, is every performer's story.
We sat in this big circle, and Michael started.
What I want to do is really like an interview.
All the stories came out of that first tape session.
I used to dance around in the living room with my arms like this.
I began to hear musical numbers.
He wants me to come back to New York now.
The first song they wrote, I knew that this was going to be a great show.
5,
5, 6, 7, 8.
Casting always is the biggest challenge. Trying not to duplicate the original cast.
3,000 people auditioned for the show.
It's a question of letting yourself fly.
I was up against my closest friend. It's hard.
This is the tough part.
They made a cut. Unfortunately, I didn't make it. I got a call back. But I'll be happy either way. Yeah, either way. I'll be, yeah.
Well, you got me. Sign them up.
This blonde girl was killing it, and I thought, who's that girl?
You did really well, though.
Am I doing something you don't like? You told me to be myself.
I think that maybe there's a show in there that should be called a chorus line.
It takes your guts, it takes your soul, but you're willing to give it.
This is nobody. This is on nobody else's top five. This is
I'm looking it up though. I have it
my
up.
personal Josh Adler top five, and I'm a huge musical theater fan. And I think every little step is when I used to teach actors, I'd be like, "Your assignment, go watch this movie," because it's about a chorus line. But more interestingly, in 1974, I think like in January of 74. Starting at midnight, what was his name? Michael Bennett, a choreographer, went into a theater and got a bunch of working dancers. And he recorded the session about what is it like to be a dancer, to love, to be an artist. And that became the musical A Chorus Line, these monologues, these discussions. And so this movie came out in 2008. I think it was probably around 2006 or so. They did a chorus line revival and a documentarians. I'm very respectful of names. So it's Adam Del Dio and James D. Stern made a documentary about the audition process for the new chorus line, but also weaving in and out the original chorus line, and watching the audition process and what artists do and the cattle call and everything was just, I think, beautiful and like so moving. And I used to show it to my acting class because there's an actor named Jason Tam, who I met actually a few years ago when I went to see a musical called Be More Chill. He was in it, and my buddy was brought me there for producers tickets. The producers gave us free tickets because my buddy was investing in their other musical. So we went backstage, met the actors, and I'm like, Jason Tam. I took a picture with them. I'm like, I just gotta say, man, I fucking show you the scene of you auditioning chorus line to every actor I've ever met, because I think it shows so much. And he was very grateful and sweet. I'm like, one day you and I are working together. You think I'm crazy right now, but one day, Jason, because Broadway actors would love to be in any film. Like they
right, sure.
You know who certain Broadway actors are. They might be able to sell a ticket on Broadway, but some of the great Broadway actors of all time you've never heard of. But there's a scene where Jason Tam, the auditions for the character of Paul, who gives this devastating monologue about realizing when he realized he was gay. And again, remember, this is late 1970s, so this was a big deal on Broadway. Now a big monologue about realizing I was gay would be like, and so,
right, yeah,
thank God,
right,
we've moved on as a society.
Yeah.
So this monologue is devastating, and you watch the producers watch audition after audition after audition. Fine. Tam comes in, and every single producer is in tears at the end of it. In tears. You as the audience are in tears watching it. And I always tell my actors, my acting students, I'm like, I don't know how to fucking tell you to be a good actor. I could teach you this. I could teach you about making sure to listen, make sure to do this. But how do we explain it? He just nailed it. He made people who've been listening to this audition for hours, actors after actors, and he made them cry. He was so good. And that, like, if that's all, if the entire documentary was those 5 minutes, I'd be like, this is my favorite documentary.
Wow.
the day I found out that my first film, I had a feature film with a famous actor that I wrote, and I was getting ready for pre-production. I found out that this guy dropped out because he had I found out later, to go to rehab. But at the time, I didn't know that. I was devastated. It's one of the most devastating professional days of my life. And that night, we happened to have tickets for a chorus line, me and my wife were married. I remember sitting in a parking lot crying to my father, and my dad, was giving me my dad's phenomenal dad, who's made me feel okay, but I was still devastated. We go see a chorus line. When they sing the song "What I Did for Love" in the movie, they fucked it up because they made it about the character singing it about Michael Douglas, who is the choreographer. Terrible. The song, if you ever listen to it, again, I apologize to you or anybody who's like, yeah, whatever. What I Did for Love is this gorgeous song that's very famous because many people did it. If you listen to it, you're like, oh, you're thinking about what I did for love. If you take it literally, it's about relationships, but it's not. It's what I do for art. And as an artist, I like right now, I am so in love with this documentary about my friends who are intellectually disabled that I will be devastated if it's not seen, because and I promised my wife that wouldn't happen. My wife said, if you're going to do this, you have to do it for yourself, and you have to be okay if nothing happens with that. I'm like, absolutely. But it's a lie.
It's hard.
What I Did for Love is about what if tomorrow you can no longer do it. And so, having just lost my film that day, I'm the 30-year-old straight white male in the audience, bawling hysterically at the song. My wife's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, what I did for love, kiss the day goodbye, think about tomorrow. Like, just the lyrics, like,
I get to you.
Are fucking devastating to an artist, man.
Yeah. No. So does the movie, you mentioned, the monologue, does the movie go to certain characters, certain people? Okay, they do. Okay.
They're following the casting process of certain actors.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, so you're seeing, and like the woman, Charlotte D'Ambro, I can't pronounce her last name, but she's like won a couple of Tonys, who gets the lead in this. You're seeing her, and this person is trying out for this role, and it's great. And it's like watching a reality show where who's going to get the part.
Right. Yeah, it does sound like that. Yes.
But instead, it's really good.
Okay. I look for. I'm definitely. I have it on my phone here, so I'm definitely gonna watch it because, like you, I'm not as big as Broadway musicals. I would love to watch more if I could. I've seen a few. Chorus Line I've never seen on Broadway, and I would love to see this documentary because Broadway is something I would love to dive more into. All right, so my number 3 is one that was on your list. It's Hoop Dreams. You mentioned it. I mean, it's just a fantastic film. I don't know how you felt about the coach. I thought he was a villain in this, to be honest with you. He throws away the one kid who couldn't afford, wasn't that great of a player, as good as the one kid. So he basically throws him away. Meanwhile, this kid's traveling 80 miles back and forth to school, trying to just get to this Catholic school. Like you said, it's heartbreaking. The one kid who's supposed to be the star gets injured and has a baby. I mean, just going through life itself, and not for nothing. The heroes of this movie, to me, Josh, were the mothers. The mother of this one, especially, is dealing with an abusive husband who's selling drugs while the kid's playing ball in the streets, and she's going for her nursing, license and stuff. It's just, I mean, just unbelievable, and it just shows you what these poor kids go through in these low income families, and just these dreams that they have, and just you root for them, but and they have trouble with the education, and they have trouble with money, and it's pain. It's a beautiful movie to watch though at the same time. I loved it.
Look, the last thing I'll say is, I was literally preparing, by the way, Mike, to be like, great, I've said enough. We don't need to, but I'll say this. As a father, I raised my son to constantly question why, opposed to just that's it. And, sometimes when you see I look forward to showing him Hoop Dreams, because the question like you just said, like the father who's dealing drugs and abusive and this and that. I can't hate him as a black and white villain. Like I can't just look at it that way, because you also have to teach our children there is context and there is a history of, whether I don't give a shit about politically talking about, race theory or whatever, but the truth of the matter is that African Americans have been marginalized throughout history. And there's a reason that this black father, who I believe does love his son, but this is also a man who wasn't brought up by a father who showed him love in the right way. And this is a man who wasn't given opportunities. And we are a nation of survivors, and people have survival instincts. And his survival instincts was, I got to sell drugs to do that. Not saying in any way like it's right. I'm just saying it's not black and white. No pun or weird meaning intended.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, but like I said, and that's why what made me so mad about the movie was the coach. Like, it's all about him. It's just like, all right, you're not that great of a player, so you don't have to go to school. I'm not gonna, bend over backwards to do that for you. Meanwhile, the other kid who he does like, and obviously he gets injured. Well, you're not that great anymore. So, you lost your passion, you lost this, and just like, no, oh my God, I know coaches like that because I played basketball.
Yeah,
And
sure.
it's just, yeah. So it's like I said, I'm just glad reading about them a couple of weeks ago that them two now have their own podcast now, so which is great. I'd love to listen to it. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah,
but but the fact that they go through those 4 years and just, God, you root for both of those kids so badly, and it's just it's a great movie. I loved it, Josh. I thought it was awesome. All right, number two, go over to the top there. What we got?
Absolutely. All right, it's called Jesus Camp.
This is a sick old world. Kids, you gotta change things. Boys and girls can change the world? Absolutely.
I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag.
There are two kinds of people in the world. People who love Jesus and people who don't.
Speak the word of the Lord.
Where should we be putting our focus? I'll tell you where our enemies are putting it. They're putting it on the kids. How long have you been a Christian?
At 5, I got saved.
Yeah?
Because I just wanted more of life.
You go into Palestine and they're taking their kids to camps like we take our kids to Bible camps, and they're putting hand grenades in their hands.
There's an excitement, yet there's a peace with it all, too. It's really cool. I really feel that we're a key generation to Jesus coming back. And we are a generation that needs to rise up and run with that baton.
How many of you want to be those who would give up their lives for Jesus?
We're being trained to be God's army.
You are the beginnings of a movement. Raise up righteous judges.
There's a new church like this every 2 days in America.
25% of the American population, that's about 80 million people.
If the evangelicals vote, they determine the election.
They've taken over the White House, Congress, the judiciary for a generation.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
This means war! This means war! Are you a part of it or not?
Jesus Camp. Okay.
I'm just, you're like, I don't know any of your films.
Listen,
to be fair, I saw it in theater, 2006, directed by Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady. And it's one of those movies that I think is great because I think you could look at it and be like, make fun of these crazy fucking wackos who go to this camp, and I'm sorry, I think Colorado could be Montana, whatever. And these are about, evangelical Christian camp. And it's a tough watch. It's like, holy shit, these are insane. But, I spent my life going to a Jewish camp. And I think it would be really, really hypocritical of me to say like these people are insane, though they are like they're insane.
Right. Yeah.
I went to a camp that taught me about my history and about Zionism and about other things, but this is a really hard look at young people who have dedicated their lives and to Jesus, and in a very beautiful way, but a very disturbing way. And I think I've always said, as somebody who has trouble with religion, people I respect most in the world are people who know what's going to happen, like who know that there's an afterlife and Jesus Christ will be there. Like, man, if I knew that, life would be so much easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But this is just a movie about, like, it's hard. Like, I think you could look at it and laugh at it. I think you could look at it and just be mesmerized by this group of people. And like when you see a 10-year-old child speaking in tongues, like as a rational person, I'm like, that child's not speaking in tongues.
I was gonna ask you that. What's the age range of the summer camp?
Young to teenager.
10 to 13.
Yeah, yeah, a little older.
Okay.
Maybe some a little younger. But child after child in here are driven to tears by love of Christ, and it's a movie that just stuck with me, and like this movie will blow your shit out of the water. And I'll say, I don't want to like give away anything, but the woman, I believe the pastor, who had to actually close the camp due to the negative responses of this documentary. And quite frankly, I'm glad, because I think it's a disgusting place. But it's a really fascinating movie.
Why would you call it? What would they? And not to give the movie away, what kind of like? Give me an example of what would you call disgusting? Like some of the stuff they were doing.
I think the teaching of intolerance. I think some of the most beautiful people I know in the world. One of them was my college professor. When I went to Kenyon freshman year, one of the first classes I enrolled in was called Faith in Christians, or Faith in Christianity. And a lot of people say, why are you taking faith in Christianity? And I said, I want to find out why growing up in the South, kids beat me up all the time. Kids called me horrible names. Right. I want to know why they did that. And so I really want to study Christianity. And my professor, a beautiful man named Royal Rhodes, a lot of people were offended by who took the class, or like, I thought he was Christian, but he's teaching this class. To find out, I got to know him well. He was a devout Catholic. But he was a devout, educated Catholic who talked about homosexuality and other things. He was studying to be a priest at one point in his life. He went to Harvard Divinity School. But he spoke so eloquently and like about Jesus and Jesus's teachings. And though I don't believe in that, and even if I was raised a Christian, I doubt I'd believe in it. There's a lot of beauty in it. And I think Jesus Camp shows the ugly in it and the brainwashing of it. Gotcha. And I think it gives real Christians a bad name. Yeah,
I'm interested in watching that because I was raised Catholic. I'm not religious.
These aren't Catholics, by the way.
Yeah, okay, they're evangelical, right? Yeah, Christians. But I'm interested in seeing that. Religion is such a touchy subject these days, especially with politics and stuff. So I'm interested in seeing that documentary. I'm sure it's gonna touch some buttons here, so I'm looking forward to that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
My number two. These next two on my list are subjects close to my heart. So my favorite artist of all time is Elvis Presley.
Sure.
I'm a huge Elvis fan, and the best documentary I've ever seen on him was 2018. It's my number two. It's called The Searcher.
My type of music is a combination of country music and gospel and rhythm and blues all combined. As a child, I was influenced by all that.
A time when the country was into racism and segregation, he was a young kid. He was not afraid to go and be exposed to it so he could learn even more about it.
The American team just knew it rocked. No white music had ever done that.
He was snatched from the ordinary life of a young man into a place that no one else had ever been in our culture.
Elvis is a big business. Everybody was trying to get every penny they could out of whatever they could.
he's feeling that he's not in control. He wanted to grow. He wanted to evolve as an artist.
Colonel Parker, the record company, they would say to him, you don't fulfill your contracts, you won't do anything.
Elvis said, I'm starting to feel depression. I'm obligated. I don't think there's a way out for me. He felt trapped.
An artist like Elvis, he's actually pretending when he's home to be normal. And when he goes out on stage at night is who he actually is.
Deep in my heart, there's a trembling question. Still I am sure that the answer's gone.
This is the mysterious part about music. The people who mean it are generally the ones who are processing some kind of loss. And we connect to it.
No matter how frustrating the lapses in his career have been, he remains an artist, an American artist.
Elvis was a searcher. He said to me, I want to be able to reach and feel what we all go through as human beings.
Right now.
I'm glad you gave me one that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I love the way they shot this. So they talked to a bunch of people who worked with Elvis, people who loved Elvis, like Tom Petty. This is actually Tom Petty's last thing he ever did before he passed away. Bruce Springsteen's on this a lot. But what I loved about it, they don't show them. They just talk throughout the movie, and it's just pictures and videos of Elvis throughout the course of the entire thing. It's a two-part series. The first part is from his roots of music, and what I love about this movie, yes, it dives into a little bit of his personal life, about the drugs and about his divorce from Priscilla, but most of the movie is about his music and what he was searching for. He loved gospel, he loved black gospel, he loved white gospel, he loved rhythm and blues, and how he put this all together. And I just love the way it goes about it. It's about the music. It's about the man. I just love it. I just love the way it's shot. It dives into some of the pratfalls he went through when he went through with the movies, when he went through with Colonel Tom Parker. He was always, and the reason why they call it the searcher is because he was always searching for what was next for him, like what was going to make him happy as far as musically. And it seemed like he never got there. There was times he did get there, and then it would just kind of come crumbling down. But I like I said, I'm a huge Elvis fan. I've seen hundreds of documentaries about him that just are not really true or just skate one way to another. It's not about scandal. It's just a point of view about his music, and that's what I love about it. I mean, like I said, I'm a huge Elvis fan, so I'm biased with this. But to me, this is the ultimate documentary on Elvis, the man, regarding his music.
Amazing. I'm gonna see it. I think there's people who are Elvis people and there's people who are not Elvis people. Yeah. I'm neither. I'm not an Elvis person because, like, you can look right behind me. I'm a Beatles guy. I'm John Lennon's my man. That doesn't mean that there's nothing about Elvis. I'm just a Beatles guy. I took my son to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame less than a month ago when we went to Cleveland, and he didn't want to go. He's gonna be bored, but like Elvis, he was really interested for the why were people protesting? And I'm like, because when he'd move his hips, and they're like, well, what the fuck? My son. Yeah. So there's this whole great thing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about different artists protesting, like anyone from Elvis to Eminem and anywhere in between, But we watched like a short documentary on him, and it's fascinating. And we had a really good conversation about did he steal Black music, or did African Americans who were not able to become Elvis basically say, "You're our white guy, go do it." And I don't know the answer. I don't, and I'm not going to pretend to know it.
Yeah, I listen. I'm biased. I'm a huge Elvis fan. There was no blueprint. There was not a guy this famous. He gave credit where credit was due. I mean, he called Fats Domino the greatest singer of all time.
Yeah.
He always gave credit to the Black artists. For some reason, I think that's lost in that. It does dive into that in this documentary. But there was no blueprint of how he was supposed to, he was by the Beatles had each other. Elvis didn't have anybody. It was just him.
Yeah.
Colonel Parker kind of, scathed him. Unfortunately, got him to a different direction with movies and stuff. But he was alone on an island, Josh, and I just feel like, there's that thing where, yeah, he's still from Black Horse. I don't think he loved that music that he made into his own. He never, the criticism, and they dive into it really well. I thought he never wrote a song he ever recorded, and that sometimes that hurts him a little bit.
Yeah.
But they get into it that he would take a song and do it differently. That it would sound different. Like, wait a minute, that's Bridge Over Troubled Water. That doesn't sound anything like what Simon and Garfunkel did. He made it into like a gospel tune. And Paul Simon even said, once hearing that, I'm like, how can I do this song ever again? This is amazing. So even though he didn't write his own songs, the way he arranged it was another part of his genius, I think.
Look, what you just said about the way he interprets other songs, man, like, I'm not going to pretend I'm not an emotional person. I cry over different things.
Right.
But I will officially say I cried when I watched on YouTube at some point, and I still listen to it all the time. Like, him at the fucking piano with a guy holding a microphone and him doing Unchained Melody was like, I have goosebumps right now. His version of Unchained Melody was watching, like, again, I said I'm not religious and I'm definitely not a Christian, but if Jesus exists, he was inside Elvis during that song. It is. I've like played it for people. They're like, all right. I'm like, no, it's not just, number one, it is how beautifully he sang,
right?
But it's about the like fervor that he had in his soul.
Yeah, and it's so different than the one that the Righteous Brothers did. It's a gospel. That's a love song. This one is like almost like godlike almost.
It's a prayer. It's a fucking prayer, man. It's so good. It's great.
Yeah. So like I said, that's my number.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna check that out. I'm curious.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max. I just watched it recently, so it's a.
By the way, my wife, who works for that company, would like to remind you that it is not called HBO Max. It is called.
Sorry. It's called Max. Yes, it is.
my wife the other day, she's like, you got to get rid of Netflix and Hulu and all this. Like, all we need is Max. I'm like, I love Max. We're not getting rid of the other.
All right, we're here. Number one. What we got, Josh?
Let's go to one. I got to pick. This is a movie I watched when it came out. I was my second year of film school. I'm telling you this because I had a cycle, my tiny little studio on the west side, on the upper west side of Manhattan. I had a stationary bike that was cheap that I got from Sears, and I was really good at losing weight. I'm like, I would often watch TV while on it. I watched the entire movie without getting off the exercise bike. And you asked what makes a great documentary. I'm not saying this makes a great documentary, but what a plus when it's something you cannot stop thinking about and you need everybody else to watch it because you have to talk about it. And you have to talk about, did he do it or didn't he do it? And it's called Capturing the Friedmans.
Maybe I shot the videotape so that I wouldn't have to remember it myself. Like when your parents take pictures of you, do you remember being there, or do you remember just the photograph hanging on the wall?
A middle-class home, educated. Where did this come from?
You would have to wonder what kind of a family situation could produce this kind of crime.
They're gonna put me in the movie.
I I mean, I had no concept that this thing even exists in the world.
For me to be so outraged, it was like someone's worst nightmare.
They're harassing my father for no reason at all.
We'll make a film about a man that's sad and lonely.
The scenario posted by the media and the police was so incredibly way out.
The very nature of these charges is so absurd.
It was just generally a free-for-all.
It's almost surreal. I don't think any of us had any notion of what was going on or what we were doing or where any of this was leading. He told us nothing happened. That's good enough for me. Nothing happened.
It came out in 2003. Do you know it?
I do not. I'm looking it up now.
You're killing me, Mike.
I mentioned you in the email. I was like, I'm about sports and music documentaries.
I'm joking, buddy. Capturing the Friedmans will blow your mind. It's this director, Andrew Jarecki, went off he was in the process of making a documentary about people who work as children's birthday party clowns in New York. And he discovered the story about a guy. I don't want to give much away, honestly. I'll say
I'm reading now, and it looks.
It's
why it's stuck with you.
It's amazing. It's about a guy who's like a clown, and he has a daycare. Like he serves kids, and the whole thing is, did him and his son sexually abuse a lot of children? And that's it. And I think like the obvious answer is like in today's society, especially, you would be like, this guy's guilty.
Right.
No. And I think a lot of people got pissed. Like, if you're like, I don't know if he's guilty, like, I don't know. And I think the director has come into a lot of, from what I read, has been criticized for saying, I don't know. And I remember leaving, and it's something that getting ready for this, I'm like, oh, I got to watch this again. And I honestly just didn't have time because I was trying to watch a bunch of new things. But I'm going to watch it again over the next few weeks. I want to watch it with my wife because she loves these kind of things. That this is a hard movie, but one that you like, there's a hard movie that's like, it's hard to read The Scarlet Letter, because The Scarlet Letter, the way Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote, is hard to read. I made my son, I'm a shitty father, I made him read Huckleberry Finn last year in 6th grade. And the teachers were like, you're doing what? I'm like, yeah. I only found out later that that's like a high school book. I thought it was a middle school book. And like every night he's like, why are you doing this to me? It was that's hard. This is a hard movie, and like, not like to get through. It's hard because you're like shaking watching it. And it makes you think a lot. And it's just a fucking movie that sticks with you, man.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm reading a little bit about it as you talk about it, and
try not to read too much.
No, I'm not trying. Yeah, I'm not. So, but I just a synopsis of it, and it sounds like it's very harrowing.
Yeah, and most of it's like home movies from the family that just like they just left these cameras rolling all the time through a lot of uncomfortable things. And I don't know, like, I'm gonna watch it again. Hell, if I get, not that I don't love them immensely, but if I'm lucky enough to get home and my son's at his friend's house and my wife's at somewhere, like, I'm literally thinking like, college football, I think I may be watching Capturing the Friedman and the Searcher.
I'm watching all the 4 that I haven't seen that you bought. I can't wait to dive into them. I'm definitely gonna watch them tomorrow.
You gotta text me and just like let me know.
Absolutely. Before NFL football, I'm definitely gonna watch at least 1 or 2 of these. I can't wait to dive into it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, like, I think just as a like, hey, I want to talk to my new friend about movies.
Yeah.
I'm like, you gotta watch Capturing the Friedmans first. Then
I can't wait.
Because those are the 2 that like we gotta talk about. Every little step we don't have to talk about. King of Kong is like, hey, that was fun. Not much more to talk about. But Capturing the Friedmans and Jesus Camp, there's something we don't have anymore. We don't have discourse. And I talk about this with my wife a lot, who's like, she makes fun of me and my college friends. And my wife is very smart. She has an amazing job at Warner Brothers Discovery, but she doesn't have the like, let's watch a movie and have discourse.
Mm.
And I think we as a society don't do that. We live in a TikTok, YouTube generation where it's like, let's watch a clip and share it. But there's something and that's why one of my best friends in Rockland County has become my rabbi, Brian Lycan, not for any religious reasons, but because him and I could sit for an hour talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. And then, like, most people you'll go to a movie with, you'll go see Killers of the Flower Moon. And at the end, what do you say to your friends? You say, what do you think? Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. All right, where do you guys want to go for dinner?
Right. Yeah, you don't really dive into it.
Yeah, but fucking Catherine the Friedman, Jesus Camp especially, you're like, let's dive into that shit.
I gotta look forward to it. I can't wait to watch those.
Yeah.
So my number one, I mentioned about Elvis being a favorite.
By the way, I'm such a narcissist that I'm like, all right, guys, we ready to go? And I'm like, oh wait, he's got number one. Sorry, go ahead.
So my number one, another passion of mine is pro wrestling. I was part of a show called Busted Open on Sirius XM for a number of years. And I think this movie documentary captures wrestling. And I think it changed the way people watch pro wrestling and thought of pro wrestlers. And that's Beyond the Mat.
Now available on DVD. Showtime! Step into the ring. Oh my God! Feel the rush. And here I go! Own the action. This is the dance! The new ringside special edition of Beyond the Mat.
I've never seen anything like this.
Get the true inside story from wrestling's biggest superstars.
The Rock is the most electrifying man in sports entertainment.
Now with hours of exclusive bonus footage, including an all-new audio commentary featuring wrestling legends Mick Mankind Foley and Jesse the Body Ventura with director Barry Blaustein.
Why doesn't Vince wear a tie? I don't think he knows how to tie one.
In the no-holds-barred movie Vince McMahon doesn't want you to see.
He's gotta puke!
Because the truth hurts. The new ringside special edition of Beyond the Mat, now available on DVD.
Yeah.
1999. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Sure.
To me, it's brilliant. Back before then, everything was like, oh, wrestling is the F word. It's fake. It's not fake. It's scripted. I just love the way, and he goes into different parts of different wrestlers. He goes to the old school guys like Terry Funk and Jake Roberts. There's this amazing scene with Jake and his daughter who hasn't seen in years. Jake, unfortunately, is going through a drug habit, and he follows him around, and just the he was in the WWE for a number of years. Now he's working in these shit towns and shit buildings, and he's working these shit hotels, and he's just depressed, and it's just awful the way he's going by his daily day by day. He goes into Terry Funk, who's supposedly retiring. He's not retiring actually, but they get into that. And then Mick Foley, which I think is the star of the movie. He's a WWE guy. He does all these crazy things, bleeds and gets hit by chairs. And there's this poignant moment at the end of the film where he's in this match with The Rock, and The Rock is really bashing him in the head with chairs, like really hitting the head with chairs, and the blood is streaming down. And in the front row is his wife and his two kids, and they are crying.
Oh, wow.
And the director of the movie, I think his name is Barry Blaustein.
Yeah.
He shows Mick Foley that footage of his wife and kids crying, and he looks like, I can't do this again. I can't do this again. I can't subject my family to this. And it's just, I just think from that point on, wrestling was looked at differently, especially for people who didn't like wrestling, who saw it as fake, as a show. And it's a show, but they saw the grimy stuff that these wrestlers go through, that they're on the road 250, 300 days out of the year. And they're working their asses off. And even though it might be staged, they're literally getting hit. They're getting physically pummeled, and they're going through injuries, and they're going through tough times, not seeing their families, not seeing, missing birthdays, missing anniversaries, just to, make money and perform in front of a crowd. I love this movie so much, Josh. To me, it's my number one. Again, the subject matter is dear to my heart. I've been a wrestling fan since I was 5 years old. So, but it's the first time I think that wrestling wasn't thought of as these guys are fake. It was like, oh my god, this is these guys go through a lot of shit.
I thought I've seen it, but I don't think I have. I don't know why I haven't. I'm not going to add to this because I've talked enough. I'll just say I'm jealous of those who love wrestling because I don't get it.
I get it.
But I know too many very smart people who love it. And so I know, look, I was raised by parents who raised me on opera and musical theater and this and that. Like wrestling was a form of trash. So that's how I was raised. And I know too many smart people who are like, oh no, it's wrong. It's fantastic entertainment. That being said, I don't see a world where I'll ever get into it, but I definitely want to watch. Like Beyond the Mat is now on that list of if my wife and son leave me alone for the day. Of one like they're a perfect day for me is like number one, taking a piss because oh, I have to pay. And number two is going to get something healthy to eat. And number three is going home, praying that my home is empty, and everybody's happily doing something.
Yes,
and
of course.
Spend the day watching this because I really want to watch this now. So thank you.
I think listen, you won't become a wrestling fan from this.
Oh, I don't think I will.
But what you do is you'll get an appreciation of what these guys go through every night, especially back then, where it's just like I said, they go through a lot of shit being on the road. How they deal with different storylines, how they conduct a match between two guys who are fighting each other, supposed to be enemies, and how they construct a match. It is theater in its own way, So it's.
Well, I think you said the perfect thing that I think should really sum up what you and I are talking about, which is you won't be a wrestling fan, because that's what it is. Like in the ideal world, what I would have done with my film Living the Fantasy is you're not going to suddenly be a fantasy sports fan, but you'll understand. You'll get it. You'll get why people love it, even if it's not for you. And I think what a wonderful thing. Like, I'm not a fan of Donkey Kong. Like, of course, I played it like any kid. But like King of Kong is like, oh, I get it. I get what these people's obsessions. I think they're weird as shit.
Yeah.
My wife showed me, she showed these people who like do, oh, it was so funny. And I'm going to say it wrong. It was something so weird. It was like they walk around with like dolls and they do these choreographed dance with them. And it was hysterical. Like you're laughing at them. You're not laughing with them. Right. And my wife's like, oh my God, your next documentary has got to be that. And my first thought was like, no, because those 2 minutes were fantastic. But I don't want to see a world where I have to see them for an hour and a half. I don't think there's probably much more than these people are kind of fucking weird.
Yeah.
And which is great. Like everybody's weird in their own way. Like,
right.
But you won't become a fan, but that's great. I think that's just a perfect way because that I'm not like I saw the movie The Wrestler with Darren Aronofsky and I thought it just like blew my mind as a narrative film. Again, in no way am I saying that it was true to wrestling, though I hear it is.
Very close, yeah.
Yeah, but I just thought it was a beautiful tale about this guy who's just living this horrible, horrible life, but it's his life. It's how he knows it.
Yeah.
Can I give you my honorable mentions before we go?
Oh, please do. I have a couple of my own too.
It'll be very quick. I won't talk. I'll talk about each of them for 5 seconds. Bowling for Columbine.
Yeah, that was one of mine too.
Would easily be my favorite documentary. And this isn't an insult to Michael Moore, because I love Michael Moore. I have trouble seeing him as my personal definition of a documentary. I think he goes in when I was a kid, I went to see the movie JFK. And I went back to my social studies teacher at a private school in Macon, Georgia. And I'm like, fucking JFK, like they're all lying to us, blah, blah. And my teacher's like, I love your passion. It's a movie. And Oliver Stone has a very, very clear check out. Like, you're wrong. It was proof. It was proof. Michael Moore's the same way in that way. Like, I saw Bowling for Columbine, and it's crazy. I watch it now as an adult. I'm like, he's a very entertaining dude and with a very clear agenda. I mean, Fahrenheit 9/11 way more. When I saw Fahrenheit 9/11, I called my dad, who was my dad, God bless his soul, hardcore right-wing Republican. I'm like, your fucking president is ruining our lives, whatever. Like, I got kicked out of an Applebee's in Macon, Georgia, when I was yelling at my dad. The waitress said, if you're going to talk about our president, you have to leave right now. And I'm like, fuck you, I'm leaving. Like, I was easily manipulated.
Right. Yeah.
Moore does a great job of that, right?
Yeah, he does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was part of my honorable mention too, by the way, Bowling for Columbine. So
great movie.
It's tremendous. Yeah.
And like, there's nothing, nobody could do a movie where you're like leaving being like, oh man, it was awesome the way those kids were killed in Columbine.
Yeah. Right. And the movie doesn't have to be, you have to agree with it. Like, it's like same thing with Super Size Me. I didn't agree with some of the stuff he said, but just, it was thought provoking though.
I forgot to tell you, by the way, a Super Size Me I went to see with my friend Nina. She's a vegan. I eat whatever. Swear to God, I left it. I'm like, I know this is crazy, but I'm going to McDonald's. Like the opposite. Like, usually that movie.
Yeah, the opposite for you, right?
Yeah. It was like, I fucking want a cheeseburger, man. I'm gonna get some supersized motherfucking fries. Quickly, Won't You Be My Neighbor about Mr. Rogers.
Okay.
On an airplane, and again, like, I was the embarrassing guy in his 40s just bawling hysterically, like, why can't we have Mr. Rogers in our life? Greatest event ever. The Up series, which I mentioned again, by Michael Apted, started in 1964. Every 7 years, he documents the same group of British people. He's now 63 Up, was I think 2019. It's known as the greatest documentary of all time by a lot of smart people. And it's great, but it's no fun to talk about because it's so great. You know, it's like, we're gonna say, what's your favorite movie of all time? If I came on, it's like Citizen Kane, I would suck. But Citizen Kane actually is one of the best movies of all time.
Right.
There's a movie called Overnight, which you will love. It's about a guy named Troy Duffy, who went from, like, he's like a Boston fucking boss, you know, I can't do a Boston accent. Boston guy, he goes to LA as a bouncer and a bartender. He sells his screenplay Boondock Saints for $1 million, has a music deal. He's an overnight sensation. Biggest asshole you'll ever see in your life. His career went to shit. He thought he was the second coming of Jesus. And it's a painful film to watch. And you hate this guy.
Interesting.
And the last two are Murder Ball, which was 2005, which I know you would love.
I've heard of that one, yes.
Murder Ball is great. It's about people think about disabilities, people who are paralyzed who play the sport Murder Ball.
Right.
And the last one is The Last Waltz by Martin Scorsese.
Okay. So some of mine is When We Were Kings. It's a documentary, about Ali and George Foreman, which is tremendous. I love that one.
If you're doing a list of top 5 sports documentaries of all time,
it's got to be in there.
When We Were
Kings. I love that one. There's an interesting one, and it made me not like Jim Carrey. It was called Jim and Andy.
I watched it 2 weeks ago. I loved. I watched it when it came out, and then I rewatched it 2 weeks.
Yeah, it seemed like that movie definitely changed him, and not for the better. By the way, maybe I'm wrong in that. It did something to him that I can't explain. But just like when he talked about, oh, Andy Kaufman did this movie, not me. It was Andy Kaufman that did this. It was just like, what? Like, it's very strange, but I love it.
I have a chip on my shoulder where, like, when people talk that much, I'm like, they're a little full of shit. I actually don't know that about Jim Carrey. Like, I think he's a genius, and he's insane. Yeah, I think he's probably mentally ill in the most positive way to say that.
Right.
It takes a little mental illness to do what he's done. But I also think you're right. Like, what's his career been? Like, this is a guy that should still be the guy.
That's exactly what I was thinking there, Josh. It was just like, ever since that movie, I mean, I'm sure he's done some other stuff, but that movie, but that movie, ever since then, he really hasn't taken off like I thought he was. I mean, he was huge, obviously, back then, but my God, he put so much into that movie. Just a great documentary. And we mentioned that, I don't know if we did it before the show, the 7-5, I love. which is about crooked cops in East New York back in the 80s. It is mind-boggling and fascinating all at once, what these cops did. That's another great one. So those are the three of mine. Like I said, I've been into. I really haven't watched a lot of documentaries. Like I said, most of it's been ESPN's 30 for 30 or HBO Sports or some of these music ones. Those are my honorable mentions as well.
Amazing.
So yeah. So Josh, this was awesome, man. Thank you so much.
I win the award for the most long-winded. Like,
no, I love it. What the? Oh my God, we're almost 2 hours. I love it.
Yeah, it's crazy. No, this is fun, man. I love talk. As I said, I love discourse. I just love it. I love talking about things that are interesting, and I could, it was great.
Fantastic, Josh. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. What's your top 5 documentaries? Please comment below, like, and subscribe. Josh, it was a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
My pleasure as well. Thank you, Mike.